Hey, Blue Jays fans. It is ALS Awareness Week throughout Major League Baseball. Tonight, we hope to add to your awareness of the JFtC versus ALS campaign and talk about a theory you need to be aware of here on the On Fek Circle. We stream live to Blue Jay fans everywhere every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Jays from the Couch YouTube channel. You can laugh a little while thinking a lot about baseball from a Blue Jays point of view. This program is joined on our YouTube channel by Sunny Side of the Dome, hosted by Jays from the Couch writer and analyst Karen Suter, and she comes to you live Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Karen is the voice of the diehard Blue Jays fan, and she brings Jays news and notes to life in a very personal way. All of this quality Blue Jays programming would not be possible without the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, which streams live Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel, the Jays from the Couch Facebook page, and on Twitter at Jays from Couch. Our senior editor and founder, Shaun Doyle, creates and moderates Blue Jays Talk for All with Blue Jays players, beat writers, out-of-town analysts, and fellow couchers like Karen and myself. Never miss our fake Blue Jays news segments. You can download all 298 episodes anywhere you find your podcasts, and all of these fine programs stream free right to where you are and are brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. I am the Fekless Wonder, Steve Fek. Welcome to my living room. It's kind of a very special On Fek Circle. This coming Thursday is Lou Gehrig Day across Major League Baseball. The whole idea and the festivities throughout the week is to bring awareness about the scourge that is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, but has earned the moniker Lou Gehrig's disease because that is what took his life at a very young age. We'll talk a little bit more about, Lou Gehrig, his efforts, even when stricken, to help raise awareness and fund research. Talk a little bit about, various campaigns, the various ways that you can contribute to bring an end to ALS in somebody's lifetime. Right now, there's no cure. It's only a matter of quality of life issues at this point, but we'll go into a lot more of those details as we go on. So I thought we would do it here in my living room rather than be the feckless wonderland in my little fan cave that I generally do broadcast from. I thought I would invite you in. This is Fek's house. Okay, this isn't the feckless wonder. This isn't me ranting and raving like I usually do about Ross Atkins or Charlie Montoyo or the bullpen. It's a conversation. Every week we want it to be a conversation, but especially this week, I thought we'd be a little bit more relaxed. You might even see my hound dog Busy show up. He is a feed me Seymour kind of animal, so I'm sure let's say he has not been fed yet. He may rear his head at some point to try to get my attention. But we're here for the next 30 minutes or so to talk Blue Jays baseball. Before we get to an analysis of the Blue Jays and the Pythagorean one loss percentage statistic. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast. It was a featured part of my MLB Minute article that I put out on jaysfromthecouch.com. It generally publishes every Sunday. I want to talk about some feckless wonders. And actually, the first wonder is really something that you might be wondering about. You might be saying to yourself or talking to the screen and saying, Fek, okay, that's great. That, Jays from the Couch has this campaign to help support ALS Canada. Um, I wonder, how can I help increase awareness? How can I be a part of that? Now, of course, you can go to our website, jasonthecouch.com. If you scroll down on the right hand side, toward the bottom of the scroll, you'll see a section that features a link to a page where you can make a direct tax deductible donation to ALS Canada. So that, I mean that's a great way to get it started. Or you see right above it, you'll see the link to our Red Bubble shop. And the point of bringing it up now is not because we're trying to hawk merchandise. I mean, we've got some pretty cool merchandise. This is showing that I am a proud supporter of the JFTC versus ALS. There are cell phone covers, there are mugs, there are T-shirts, clocks, all kinds of things. 100% of the profits from anything you buy is donated directly to the JFTC versus ALS campaign in ALS Canada. But there's also a way that you sitting out there watching this live, or even if you're catching it, in the archives on the YouTube channel or on Facebook, or you go back and catch the Twitter link. Usually, I'm shamelessly self-promoting this show, so it's pretty easy to find if you're following me at Fekless Wonder. From this show on, in perpetuity, or until Shaun gets sick of me and takes the show away, every time a live question or comment comes up during the show, I'm going to donate $1 to the JFTC versus ALS campaign. And in case you're not watching it live and you're catching it on archive, because I understand that not everybody is planning their life around me. Anybody that leaves a comment on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook link, I'm going to donate $1 from now until forever. This helps bringing you're now becoming part of spreading the awareness, being part of our campaign in a very direct way. Yes, we want to have conversations, but this is your way to help contribute without really having to do anything other than type your question or share your comments. You can even call me an idiot. So it's really it's like a double header win for you. It's a sweep of a double header. You get to call me an idiot, and you get to make sure a dollar gets donated to the JFTC versus ALS campaign. So that is a wonderful thing. Um, it's a cause that's very, very dear to my heart. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Certainly, our founder and senior editor, Shaun Doyle, it has affected him directly. He lost his father-in-law, someone he had known since he was a teenager. So, and it affects so many people in so many ways. The least that I can do and help you do is help contribute to try to wipe ALS off the face of the earth. Sarah says, I myself have some awesome JFTC merchandise, all high quality, and can't beat that all the money goes to ALS. Well, thank you, Sarah. You certainly have been a very loyal viewer and listener. You're always putting in comments. The first dollar on the new part of the JFTC versus the On Fek Circle campaign in conjunction with a JFTC versus ALS. I'm glad you enjoy the merchandise. I mean, it's great stuff. I mean, I'm not exactly the most domestic person. This is held up through multiple washes and multiple spillages. So, by all means, check out the Redbubble shop, and 100% of the profits go to ALS Canada. Now, another feckless wonder that I've had kicking around my head is that I wonder when the front office is going to make a move to add a bat or a bullpen arm, preferably a left-handed bat, and specifically a left-handed bullpen arm, because if you haven't heard, let me channel my inner Homer Simpson. Woohoo! Ryan Baracki has been designated for assignment. Now, again, he's been in the organization a very long time. He is one of the few remnants in the organization from the Alex Anthopoulos days. He's had a lot of injury problems. By all accounts, he's supposed to be a terrific guy. He's just not an effective major league pitcher. And he's even struggled at times at AAA. So the Ryan Baracki era in Blue Jays land is over. Hopefully that means Tim Mayza is coming back sooner than we anticipate. In the interim, they brought up Trent Thornton to take his spot in the bullpen because I guess there's still a limit 25, 30 pitcher limit or whatever it is. It's so ridiculous. I mean, I'm really concerned about that because playoff contending teams like the Jays, by this point of the season, generally have a good idea who's assuming what role in the bullpen, what their rotation looks like, what kind of depth they have coming up. And if you keep extending this deadline, managers are going to use the players that are there. They're not going to sit back and say, well, we're only going to use that 14th pitcher in case of a blowout or in case of a really short outing. They're going to use whatever's available to them to win a game, especially if you're in a pennant race. And these guys aren't really getting comfortable and adjusting to the roles they're going to need to fill and fill effectively as the season goes on. So I wonder what's up Ross Atkins' sleeve. I cannot imagine that they're not going to go out and either sign someone that's been unsigned for whatever reason, maybe coming off of an injury, maybe rehabbing, whatever, or going out and making a trade, probably having to pay a little bit more than they would like to get that reliable bullpen arm in there. They need another reliable left-handed reliever. When they signed Andrew Velasquez in the offseason, I thought he had the potential to not necessarily pitch leverage Tim Mesa type innings, but be a consistent performer. I don't think he's quite there yet. I know that when he did sign behind the scenes, the Jays from the couch, the folks that were more into the analytics, the Jim Scotts and the Bob Ritchies, were not as thrilled about his potential as I was, and it turns out that they may be right. Velasquez, at least at this point, is not a leverage inning left-hander. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next week or so. But since we're talking about needing to add a left-handed bat or any bat, or needing to add that left-handed bullpen arm or any kind of bullpen depth, I want to go back to something that we talked about on the podcast last night. And I want to try to clarify a couple of things because I don't know whether it was I did not explain it quite as well as I should have in the MLB Minute, or that people just are not used to Pythagorean one loss record. And basically, what it is your run differential. The formula, without getting into a big, long, involved thing, is you take your runs scored, and in essence, you square it. You go to a power of 2. It's 1.8. You take that, and it's to a power of 1.83, and then into that you divide your runs scored plus the exponent and the runs allowed, and that'll come up with a percentage. So let's say at 50 games, the percentage is 50%, and therefore your record should be 25 and 25. It should be a 500 club. Now the Blue Jays, and certainly in this, Los Angeles / Anaheim Angels series and some of the series before that, have kind of closed the gap in their run differential. But still, technically, by this formula, the Blue Jays actually have 4 more wins than what their run differential and performance on the field actually shows. And I think that's where I kind of missed the target, certainly on the podcast last night. Run differential is an actual on the field result. I know that's a point that Shaun had brought up while we were talking about that in our ML segment on the podcast. That I'm really focusing on actual record and what's happening on the field. This is a reflection of what's happening on the field. So now at the end of the day, it's what your actual wins and actual losses are. Like last year, the Blue Jays Pythagorean win total was 99. So that shows you that the team in many ways, despite the outstanding offense, underperformed. And that time frame was really that 4 to 6 week window from May into mid June when they acquired, Simber and Dickerson and other relievers, Trevor Richards. The bullpen was coughing up so many, games, and there were some lopsided performances that were really primarily focused on the bullpen. So that's why when I bring up the Pythagorean one-loss record, it's great that the Blue Jays have found a way. Okay, they've played under a good luck sign, if you will. Certainly, their offense has not performed the way anybody thought that it would. That's gonna correct itself. But the fact that in many situations your non-leverage relievers have given up untimely home runs, have coughed up a bunch of runs. We've had Jose Barrios on a couple of occasions just implode and just not have it from the beginning. Where you had that issue early on. Kikuchi has been much better recently. He's had some starts that way. So that's what it's telling you. Okay, if you get behind the eight ball, you need your bullpen. You need those bridge guys, those middle relievers and your long reliever to come through and be consistent. And they're actually just putting fuel on the fire. They are not stopping the bleeding. So that's why I think you need to look at this Pythagorean one loss thing because it's telling you, okay, something isn't quite right. Now, defensively, the Jays have been a pretty good team defensively this year, so I don't know that you want to focus on that. Everybody knows, okay, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is not having the year he had in 2021. I don't know that many players going forward, not alone himself, will have a year like he had last year. That was just an amazing year. And Bo Bichette has been inconsistent and up and down. You've got some surprises like Espinal, but Danny Jansen certainly has totally changed his approach at the plate and his effectiveness. He's trying to drive the ball. He's trying to pull the ball to try to generate you know extra base hits. So there's some positive things and some negative things. There's not many people that believe that this offense is going to keep struggling. I certainly believe that they will get better. Will they match where they were last year? I, I don't know if that's practical. Some of it has to do with the new ball and the fact that they're using humidors across Major League Baseball. And we're going to do a show about that, if not next week, in the next couple of weeks. It's kind of stupid to use a humidor in April and May, but in fairness, to have the same effect on the ball, theoretically, it doesn't actually happen that way. But theoretically, by having those balls stored in a humidor and they're all basically at the same temperature except in thinner atmospheres like Colorado and Arizona. And again, I'm not a scientist, but there's reasons why they have to change that because of the ball's movement in thinner air. I don't know that the big explosion we had last year and that we were all expecting this year is going to happen, but it's certainly going to be better. So that plays into the fact that their Pythagorean one loss percentage is not maybe where it should be. But certainly you can point to the bullpen. The starting rotation has had the blips like any starting. The best of starting rotations have bad outings like Barrios had the other day. You can't be giving up 10 runs in a game. That wasn't all Barrios. That is the bullpen people coming in. Baraki being the first guilty person, and that, in essence, I think that really cost him his place on the 40-man roster. You need to have those arms, and as we talked about also in that Shaun Doyle wrote a terrific article um, for JaysFromTheCouch.com. There's not much help available, major league ready help available on the 40-man roster. You're going to have to go out and get it. That can cost you two ways, prospect capital, but it's also going to cost you potentially losing somebody by having to DFA them and try to sneak them through waivers in order to bring in an outside resource to make your team better. The Blue Jays have to get better. They can be competitive and they could even be a playoff team as they are constructed now, but they're not getting out of that first round of the playoffs unless they bring in reinforcements. It's just a fact. Another major injury like the one to Hernandez, where he was out for a long time, and Danny Jansen, that could be disastrous. Now, the Jansen one they could offset by bringing up Gabriel Marino. In a perfect world, you don't do that. The Blue Jays are what they are right now. And we're not talking about 2021 and certainly not 2020 or 2019. This team has to act. All their chips are in. They've spent, they've traded for contracts, assumed contracts. They've pushed their chips in. You cannot now sit back and say, well, yeah, well, my chips are in, but, hey, I'm bluffing. Now, you're not bluffing. You got to try to draw in for that winning hand. So that's something that I just wanted to go over again because I really think I know Karen uh, has never really looked at Pythagorean theory before until we did our little game show mock up over the off season over the winter, and I don't think a lot of people put a lot of thought or put a lot of weight on Pythagorean one loss. If your team is struggling and not performing as expected, the Blue Jays, I think, are beyond the struggling part, but they're not performing as expected on a lot of different levels. That's where Pythagorean one loss theory comes into play. Okay, now every week we do a Blue Jays bedtime story. And let me remind you before we get into the bedtime story, any comments, questions, you put it up there. Shaun Doyle will get the question on the screen. When that happens, that's $1. It'll be donated, and I'll be making the donations on a monthly basis. We already have $1 tonight. And if you're not watching live and you're watching this after the fact, it doesn't mean that you can't put a comment on Facebook or a comment in when you're watching it on YouTube. Do that. Every time you do that, every time that you keep the conversation going, that's $1 to the JFtC versus ALS campaign. And that's money going to help patients. There's no cure yet. We had ALS Double Play on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. They sponsor a dedicated postgraduate researcher to try to find a cure or try to find treatments because ALS is a death sentence. It's cruel. It shows no mercy, has no prejudices. If someone is afflicted, and there's different types of it. I'm not going to go into the big scientific part of it, but in essence, we're talking about a person's life. And people that are living with it now and battling it now, they know their doctors aren't lying to them. They know that it's a matter of when, not if. So when we're talking about these donations, and again, please consider making a donation on our website to ALS Canada Direct or through making a purchase at the Red Bubble Shop. It's not just researchers going in and, I mean, they have an idea about the biology part of it. They just don't know how to manage it or find a way to allow a person to live and survive. I mean, cancer, you always hear about stand up for cancer. Cancer is a horrible thing. there are cures, and there are ways to extend life, even if it's in an advanced stage. Where with ALS, you really don't have that consistency yet, those options yet. Almost everything is still experimental. And the worst part of it is the person is aware. It doesn't really affect a person's mind. Some people are stricken with Alzheimer's type of symptoms, but basically, as they're losing muscle control and they're having trouble swallowing and all, they're aware of what's happening to them. They're aware of what they have and what it's eventually going to do. So that's why we've made such a big point over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to do it. ALS awareness means we don't know who's watching at any given time. Maybe that person doesn't know what ALS, they've heard of it or they've heard of Lou Gehrig's disease. They don't know what it is. That's why Major League Baseball has designated June 2nd as Lou Gehrig Day to help raise awareness about ALS. And June 2nd was picked because not only was it the first game back in 1925 that Lou Gehrig ever started for the Yankees. He was on the roster, but the first game he ever started, the infamous Wally Pip has a headache. I can't go, Skip. Okay, Gehrig, get in there. He didn't come out for 2,130 games. It's also the day he died in 1941. So that's where the June 2nd significance is. That's why they picked that day. Just like Jackie Robinson Day, that's the first game that an African American played in Major League Baseball. Uh, as we know, and as the modern Major League Baseball, there were African Americans and mixed race players that had played, in the 19th century, but really uh, segregation in baseball ended on April 15th with Jackie Robinson. Lou Gehrig, June 2nd. Ironically, the first game he ever started is the day that he passed away. And our story along this lines for today is that most people know the story. You know, suddenly, he was starting to struggle in 1938 and 1939. The effects of ALS were starting to show, though they didn't know that it was ALS. But even after he retired, and of course, everybody remembers the speech and everything. Lou Gehrig had multiple opportunities to go and just do like public speaking, make guest appearances. He would have made some really nice scratch, really nice money had he chosen to do that. He and his wife Eleanor agreed and decided on two things. One, Gehrig would and his estate would form a foundation and fund a research center at hospitals affiliated with his alma mater, Columbia University in New York. And he was absolutely committed to doing some kind of public service, some kind of good in his last days. And he was dead approximately within 2 years of the diagnosis. So he served as a parole commissioner. He was appointed by New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. Rather than making $100,000 a year, he made $5,700 a year. Again, he made really good money as a ball player, and he was smart, and he had an estate that has actually been allowed, that has actually helped and been dedicated to research and funding ways for to help people with ALS. But he wanted to do public service. And he wasn't just sitting behind a desk as a name. He went out when he was still mobile. He went out to various correctional facilities and he talked to wardens and guards, and more importantly, prisoners themselves who would be coming up and be eligible for parole. He wanted to understand the entire situation. He wanted to make sure that there was fairness in the granting and administration of parole. He had the money. He could have just sat back and said, "Oh, no, oh, everybody says I have a bad break, blah 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 blah." He didn't do that. He wanted to continue to give back to his hometown, New York City, and to people in general. Yes, he did have a bad break, but he never really dwelled on that. And this is I'm going to read you a quote of something that he said on a newspaper interview not long after his diagnosis and after his retirement. "Don't think that I am depressed or pessimistic about my condition at present. I intend to hold on as long as possible. Then if the inevitable comes, as we've talked, it's inevitable for people with ALS. I will accept it philosophically and hope for the best. That's all we can do." And that's all we can really do. Okay. See up there on the screen, JFTC versus ALS, donate today. Please consider donating. If it's something that you're just not comfortable doing or not sure about, comment during the live show or after the fact watching archived shows. Every time you post a comment, $1 is going to be added to the JFTC versus ALS campaign. All we can do is accept the realities of ALS and do everything that we possibly can. Maybe you just want to pray, or maybe you just want to, write letters of support or whatever, to your congressman to research whatever it is, whatever little bit it is, it's going to help. And it's not just research, it's funding wheelchairs or being able to. We'll be donating at the end of the show. Sarah, thank you very, very much. I know that you have a personal um, medical uh, condition that you support that affected your mom, but also spreading the wealth, if you will. And Shaun Doyle also wishes me to say thank you, Sarah, for committing to make that donation. You've already made donations through um, buying the merchandise you talked about earlier. You've also added $2 to what I'm going to contribute from the on behalf of the On Fek Circle and Jason the Couch. And the link to the donation, if you're watching live, the link will be in the comment section of this show on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. And okay, the Graphite Dragon came up. Can you link to the page, please? If you go to YouTube, there will be a link there in the comment section. You just click on that, it'll take you directly to be able to make a donation. It's hard for me to describe, and I'm going a little bit long, but I don't want to walk away before I say this. It is hard to understand unless you have been around a friend or a loved one that has lost their battle to ALS to understand exactly how devastating it is, primarily for the patient, because again, they're a prisoner of what's going on. They're aware of what's happening. When I was a young boy, rather difficult early upbringing, my paternal grandfather would take me out of our apartment and down to his home in the Jersey Shore, their little summer home. My sister was too young to really be able to do that. I want to say that when he was stricken, my brother was either just an infant or he had not been born yet, but my mother was pregnant with him. He took me down to the shore every weekend. He used to let me sit on his lap and pretend that I was steering the car, and obviously I wasn't. And he was a big strapping guy. He did longshoreman kind of work. Just like Lou Gehrig, I mean, a professional athlete, and so many people are generally struck down in their prime with ALS. We were driving down from Point Pleasant, getting off the Garden State Parkway, down State Highway 35 to where the summer home was, when suddenly he, he started to shake. He started having just severe cramping, muscle cramping. That's one of the early signals of someone unexplained, rather painful, rather extensive muscle cramping or muscle weakness or lost control of the muscles. I was on his lap. It was so bad, he literally had to ask me to climb off his lap, reach down where his foot was because he couldn't move his foot. He was took his foot off the accelerator, pulled off to the side, and I had to manually, as a 6-year-old, push down on the gas pedal so that the car would stop. The man that used to throw me, like literally throw me, like I was gonna say like a javelin, but that would assume that I was some kind of sleek, athletic type thing. Even as a kid, I was kind of short and stocky. So like a shot put, he would shot put me off of his boat, off of his dock, into Barnegat Bay. This was a strong man. He helped unload cargo for all of the ships coming into the port. It got to the point very, very quickly. It didn't take. It took him pretty quickly that literally he couldn't even hug or couldn't write his name. Or we used to there used to be a little basketball game that we used to play, Catico All-Star Basketball, where you pull back a lever. I would have to pull back the lever with his hand in order to do that. And you could see him just tear up because he wanted to do it himself. He wanted to be the man that he was, and this terrible disease took all of that away. So the reason we spent time on this show, and we will every podcast and whatever opportunity we can to talk about ALS awareness and the JFtC versus ALS campaign. And again, after the show, in the comment sections on YouTube and ideally in Facebook, the link to where you can make a tax deductible donation will be provided for you there. When Lou Gehrig was stricken, the reason that they called it Lou Gehrig's disease was that 99.9% of the people had never even heard of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. They had no idea what that was. And lateral sclerosis, in essence, basically is a creeping loss of muscle control. So if having to sit through this is a little tough on you, or you're like, wow, I wish we would have talked more about Pythagorean one loss theory, we've got plenty of time for that. This is a special week in Major League Baseball. It's about honoring the legacy of Lou Gehrig. What he did upon his diagnosis, he didn't just give up. He put his money literally where his mouth was. And he wanted to give back and do public service even after the death sentence that he was given by the doctors at the Mayo Clinic. We're taking this time so that eventually, for someone out there, they'll be able to say, I beat ALS. My grandfather didn't say that. My former business partner never got a chance to say that. Shaun's father-in-law never got a chance to say that. So many people out there don't get a chance to say that. Any little bit that you can contribute or help will give those people a voice. Because in the last stages of ALS, because it affects how the brain communicates with muscles, they can't even talk or swallow. You're giving them a voice. And I hope you continue to support JFtC versus ALS. Thank you for watching this special edition of the On Fek Circle. We'll be back next Tuesday. Don't forget Karen coming up talking Blue Jays baseball on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and our podcast records and streams live every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I am the Fekless Wonder, Steve Fek, and I wonder how many of you are going to join us in this fight. We'll talk to you next week. More baseball type stuff, but we'll never let you forget about the ALS campaign and ALS Canada and the fight to wipe ALS out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.